Good evening, and welcome to This Day in History. I am Cornelius Weatherford, and tonight we'll be exploring one of the darkest days in our nation's history, October 29, 1929, the day that will be forever remembered as Black Tuesday. By the end of the prosperous 1920s, American morale was high and the economy was booming. While there were several early indications of the coming depression, few people understood the warning signs until it was too late.
Of the many symptoms of the looming stock market crash, overproduction was the most evident. With new agricultural inventions, such as the tractor, farmers found themselves capable of unprecedented harvests. So much so that they produced far more than consumers needed. With each new season, farmers were left with an increasing amount of unsold crops. Eager to make up for previous seasons' lost profits, farmers would then resolve to produce even more. If they were able to sell only 3/4 of their harvested crops, they reckoned, then the same should be true for next year. Needless to say, there was a gap in their logic. At the time, farmers did not understand the concept of supply and demand. As their harvests increased with each successive season, the price per pound of their harvest decreased at an equal rate, making higher profits impossible. At this time of overproduction, Europe was already in the throes of its own depression that had begun following World War I. Nervous that the foreign depression might find its way onto U.S. soil, isolationist sentiment in the United States was stronger than ever, and international trade had come to a screeching halt. Unfortunately for American farmers, this meant that their unsold crops could not be exported, and so were either left to rot, or, if possible, sold for blowout prices. Also a result of World War I, was the giant debt owed to the United States by the Allied nations. Totaling approximately $1 billion per year, this source of income would have been invaluable to the nation's faltering economy, had the Allies been able to pay it. With the exception of Finland, the Allied nations only managed to come up with a fraction of the money owed. Finally, with regard to the stock market, overspeculation among brokers was rampant. Overly optimistic projections were frequently used to predict profits, which, in turn, encouraged the buying of more stock. Stockbrokers, constantly trying to keep up with their own unreasonable expectations, fueled an unhealthy rate of growth in the market. This initially appeared beneficial, with strong gains through August of 1929. However, overspeculation inspired false confidence in investors and blinded them to the true state of the doomed economy. The stock market finally reached an all-time high of 381 points on September 3, 1929, before steadily falling over the next 7 weeks leading up to Black Tuesday.
Hello, and welcome back to This Day in History, Black Tuesday. Sadly, it's true, there were several early indications of the stock market crash in 1929, but simply, too many people failed to see them. The result? The American people caught completely unprepared for the worst ever depression in our nation's history.
The morning of October 29, 1929 began like any other. Husbands got up early and left for work, mothers woke their children and saw them off to school, and all was well until the grave news was announced over the radio that the already struggling stock market had finally crashed.
We interrupt this broadcast for an important news bulletin, an update on the stock market slide. Wall Street analysts report that the market has fallen another 13% today, making this the fourth consecutive day since Black Thursday that the stock market has continued to worsen. The mood was tense and panicked as brokers traded an estimated 15 to 20 million shares of stock today. When the floor had closed, grown men, now penniless, could be seen weeping outside, while others begged bystanders for spare change. Stay tuned for more news as it comes in. This is KSBW News, 1290.
Despite the shock that announcements like this undoubtedly brought to millions of Americans, looking back on it, the crash shouldn't have been a surprise at all. The market had been in decline for weeks, but investors paid no attention. They instead dismissed it as nothing but a temporary slump, when it was anything but. The market had mostly stabilized for the few days following Black Thursday on October 24th, but a record 16 million shares were traded on Black Tuesday when panic set in for the second time that week. By the end of the day, investors had lost entire fortunes, and hundreds of stockbrokers were left unemployed.
Let's trade some stock.
I love money.
Okay.
I love money.
Okay.
I'm rich.
Okay.
Give me another stock.
No, I must get. Okay.
Money?
Money, thank you.
No, you spilled all my money.
Oh, so much money.
We're so rich.
Oh. the stock?
They're smaller. They're worth less.
Where did the value go?
What the heck? It's all gone.
lost everything.
We lost everything. So cold. So cold.
There's some change.
Faced with this grim situation, many were forced to part with their most prized possessions. Still, others chose even more drastic ways to cope with their losses.
No, Mr. Robertson, there's still hope.
It's too late for me.
October 29th marked the point of no return for America's vulnerable economy. On Black Thursday, the stock market had stumbled, but on Black Tuesday, it completely collapsed. From its high in September of 1929 to its low in July 1932, the market had dropped an astounding 89%. Now confronted with the dilemma of having to revitalize its lifeless economy, the United States would take more than a decade to fully recover.
Hello again, I'm Cornelius Weatherford, and you're watching This Day in History, Black Tuesday. The day of October 29, 1929 was certainly devastating for both the nation and the people. The stock market had fallen through the floor, and with it, every broker and investor. Beyond Wall Street, however, the crash had little immediate effect. Rather, it sent out a ripple of poverty that eventually spread to all parts of the nation. Thus began the Great Depression, a grueling test of endurance that would last 12 long years.
Once the Depression hit, people became nervous and attempted to remove all their life's earnings from the bank at once, but banks simply didn't have enough money on hand to repay everyone. Between 1929 and 1932, 9,000 banks went out of business, causing 9 million accounts nationwide to vanish, leaving their owners with no money to their name. All throughout the 1930s, Americans everywhere were just struggling to survive. To put it in the words of Ben Isaac, a salesman in Chicago at the time,
"We tried to struggle along making a living day by day, but I couldn't pay the rent. I had a little car, but I couldn't pay no license for it. I sold it for $15 in order to buy some food for the family. I had 3 little children. Wherever I went to get a job, I couldn't get no job. I went around selling razor blades and shoelaces. Wasn't a day I'd go over the streets and come up with 50 cents making a sale. Finally, people started to talk me into going to relief. I didn't want to go on relief. Believe me, when I was forced to go into the office of the relief, tears were running out of my eyes. I couldn't bear myself to take money from anybody for nothing. If it wasn't for those kids, I'll tell you the truth. Many a time I come to mind to commit suicide rather than go ask for relief. But somebody had to take care of those kids."
Just as Mr. Isaac was finally forced to do, many starving people of the Depression looked to the government for help. The First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, known for her kindness and generosity, received hundreds of letters from despairing citizens calling out to her for help. One such moving letter came from a young boy shortly following Christmas. "I am 10 years old. I had waited for Santa Claus to come, but my mama said the chimney was blocked and he couldn't come, so I had a poor Christmas. I was expecting Santa to bring me some things. I've read in the papers how good you are to the poor, and thought maybe you could help me. I'll appreciate it all my life. Today, we have started from school for the first day since our Christmas vacation, and all the children talk about how many presents Santa had brought them, and I felt so bad because I had nothing to say." Equally upsetting were the grim newspaper headlines that were frequent throughout the decade, such as, "U.S. Steel lays off another 10,000. General Motors stock down from $500 a share to $10 a share. 110 children in New York City die from malnutrition," and "Kentucky coal miners found living on dandelions." In the 4 years following the stock market crash of 1929, 85,000 businesses went bankrupt, cutting the national income in half. The Depression left such a devastating effect on the people of the era that survivors today, 75 years later, are still unusually stringent with their money. Without a doubt, the Great Depression of the 1930s, which sprang out from the horrific events leading up to Black Tuesday, was a time that many alive today often do not want to remember. Finally, with the help of President Roosevelt's New Deal and the industrial growth brought on by World War II, America's economy had mostly recovered by 1942.
I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. I'm Cornelius Weatherford, and good night.